Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm sorry for being a little bit late getting to this, getting online today. We've had a little studio mix-up, but let me get right to it, and I got two issues at the top that I want to address, and then happy to take your questions. The first was just, again, recapping what happened yesterday morning, where along with Governor Youngkin and the congressional delegation and local elected officials, state legislators, Board of Supervisor members, representatives from the Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber, representatives of a variety of different faith traditions. We all came together to reinforce the case that the new FBI headquarters needs to be in Virginia, in Springfield. I feel like the criteria that the GSA and the FBI have laid out, which is what's in the best interest of the FBI, and clearly the Springfield site being much closer to the training facility at Quantico, the fact that there are other FBI facilities from our record storage to other assets close by. I can tell you as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, virtually every one of the intelligence partners that the FBI works with is close by to the Springfield site. The fact that we've got Metro at that site, the fact that it's already a federally owned facility, all very strongly lean in favor of Virginia over the Maryland locations. One of the things that we wanted to show yesterday, though, as well was, and I commend President Biden for doing this, including as one of the criteria, equity. And what we wanted to show was, the FBI workforce, which used to be virtually exclusively white males, needs to look like the face of America. And in Springfield, you've got a community that is majority minority. It is a community, when you add in Eastern Prince William, where Quantico is, and parts of the city of Alexandria, is really looks like the face of Virginia and the face of America. It's Black, it's Hispanic, it's Asian, it's different faith traditions like Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and others. And the fact that we all came together yesterday to make that case, that even on the equity issue, we think Virginia will come out on top. We expect the GSA and the FBI that they will hear from each states one last time. Kind of ironic, the Maryland delegation had urged, along with us, that we needed to make this decision. It's been 15 years in process. We need to make a decision. It's for the best interest of the men and women of the FBI who protect us. The current building downtown DC is literally falling in on itself. So we want to make sure that we keep the criteria that the GSA and the FBI came up with. We'll make our next formal presentation, I believe, first or week of March or so, but this conclusion needs to come to an end, or this competition needs to come to an end, and I think Virginia will be successful. The second issue, which has obviously been on everybody's mind, and you can kind of tell when an issue breaks through just on the number of folks that I run into that I get asked about literally on a daily basis, and that's the so-called unidentified aerial phenomena. I was critical of the Biden administration on the first Chinese spy balloon satellite. I understand concerns about debris from shooting down a satellite earlier, but I felt the fact that it was basically allowed to float across the totality of the mainland of America, that the Chinese Communist Party would have never allowed an American spy satellite to float across China. So we took that down. We have done a good job of recovering some of the component parts, and there is now a deep intelligence analysis going on. Obviously, subsequent to that, there have been 3 additional shoot downs of aerial phenomena. And again, I think the IC, the intelligence community, and the Defense Department has been careful not to fully call them balloons until we can find some of the remnants of what was shot down. We've got real serious weather concerns about finding some of the component parts that were over Alaska, the other 2, one over the Yukon in Canada and one over Lake Huron. I'm hoping that we will get those find some of the remnants as soon as possible so that we can again make clear what at least I'm betting, that these were simply weather balloons or other commercial balloons put up, that there does not seem to be any evidence to date. And let's again, we got to collect first before you can make a final conclusion, but that there was any kind of threat to America from these other objects. I will point out, and this is something that we saw a lot of unidentified aerial phenomena, what we used to call UFOs, we now call UAPs, but we saw a lot of this activity for a number of years off the coast of Virginia, candidly off of Norfolk, where our naval base is. And the overwhelming majority of these unidentified aerial phenomena ended up being balloons. One of the things that it raises as a policy question is we just don't have a very good system of, if somebody, even if it's a science experiment coming out of a university and they launch a balloon into the sky, we don't have a great system of both notifying the FAA, and even if you do notify, how we continue to monitor some of these entities that literally float with the wind. So this is again an area where I think we're going to need to improve not only our kind of surveillance, but also have better rules of the road. And it's something I'm looking into. I just, matter of fact, put together a bipartisan bill with Senator Thune from South Dakota on a smoother process for drones and how we can authorize drone usage beyond visual line of sight. We've got to make sure, again, that we protect people's privacy, but there are lots of commercial applications that this kind of aircraft can be used for. And again, these are areas that are brand new, and we just need to set some framework around so that we don't have the kind of questions and consternation that perhaps these shoot downs have caused over the last week. So with that as opening comments, I'm going to turn it over to the team and be happy to start taking questions.
Senator, our first question will be from Annie Anderson with Gray TV.
Hi, Senator. We actually had a question about your upcoming TikTok legislation. One, I know previously you said you did not support a full and complete ban on it, but where does that legislation stand, and what can we expect?
I want to make clear, I did not say I don't support a full and complete ban. I think a full and complete ban needs to be on the table. What I've been saying is our efforts so far, when we find a foreign-based technology that causes a national security issue, and I believe TikTok falls into that category, not only because the amount of data it's collecting on Americans, mostly young Americans who disproportionately use TikTok, but the fact that it's been estimated, and there's been a lot of estimates, but on average about 100 million Americans are on TikTok about 90 minutes a day. And I'm really concerned that the Communist Party of China can use that as a propaganda tool and manipulate the videos that Americans are being seen for political purposes. That scares the dickens out of me. So far, what we've had, though, is, this has been something I've been focused on for a long time with my own technology background, was 6 or 7 years ago, we found a Russian software company, Kaspersky, and we finally got it off the government acquisition list. A few years back, we found the Chinese telecom provider Huawei, and we've proven it's a national security concern, and we're literally paying taxpayer dollars to rip out Huawei systems in certain rural communities in America because of the national security concerns. We're now discussing TikTok. What we've had is this ad hoc approach where it's kind of like whack-a-mole. What I'm saying, and I've been working with the Commerce Department, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, how we can put in place a more comprehensive approach that will stand up to legal muster. Remember, a platform like TikTok does get into First Amendment rights, which are more highly protected than, say, a Huawei, which is a telecom company. A process where a Commerce Department could put prohibitions up to and including a full ban, but in a way that is not simply, it's TikTok today and Huawei yesterday and who knows what tomorrow. We need an approach to realize foreign technology and national security is going to have an increasing nexus, and we have to make sure we've got a system to keep Americans safe. I am, at this moment in time, I'm trying to get this legislation right, and I'm in active conversations with a number of my Republican friends. I've got a whole group of Democratic senators who are anxious to sign on. But again, I think both the chances of passage and doing this in a way that will be greeted as a smart way rather than a one-off approach. I want to do this in a bipartisan fashion, and we're going through that due diligence process with a number of my Republican friends.
Do you think you're going to sign on to Senator Hawley's bill?
Listen, I think again, I've got a much more comprehensive and approach that actually will stand up to legal questions, and I think my approach will be ultimately the one that will be successful. But again, I've looked at other legislation, the sausage making process of how you get a bill to become a law. You got to stay open to compromise. But again, I've heard from a lot of senators of both parties that the idea of something that's comprehensive rather than a one-off where you name a specific company and go after a specific company, which frankly simply invites retaliation against American companies, I don't think that's the right approach.
Senator, our next question is Basil John. Basil John with Nexstar. Basil, are you on the line?
Hey, Senator, Basil John with Nexstar. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Basil, I've not seen you or talked to you in forever.
I know, it's been a while. They switched me over to the Northeast, but I had to hop on the call. I missed the sound of your voice, Senator.
Yeah, it's good. And I'm sure if I was seeing you, is your bird still perched behind you?
Yep, he's still doing his thing. He's he misses talking to you too on those Zoom calls.
Well, it's great to hear you again.
Great to hear you. So, Senator, I just wanted to get more on your thoughts when it comes to the whole balloon situation. Obviously, you were briefed on it, but what exactly, and if you could elaborate for me further, what would you want to see the administration do when it comes to this? Obviously, you talked about more of possibly what are balloons just right now just being identified as UAPs, but what would you want the next step to be for the administration, for the federal government to take care of this, and do you want more of a collaborative effort with Congress on it?
Let me first of all compliment the administration on one thing. We have been pushing for some time to make sure that this identification of UAPs is done in a serious scientific way. And Senator Rubio and I, along with Senator Gillibrand, have been big advocates of a program called AARO that is doing this analysis. And we have a very serious scientist, Dr. Sean Kilpatrick, who now heads up this program, and it's getting the attention, and I think it may need some additional funding, but it's getting the attention it deserves, because we're seeing, with increased radar capacity, with frankly, pilots now being encouraged to report rather than being discouraged around reporting objects they see. We need a scientific approach to do it. So that part, positive, we're moving forward. On the current situation with the not the Chinese spy balloon, which we have identified was a spy balloon, we're doing the analysis now. On the subsequent 3 objects that were shot down, we got to find some of the debris to make the analysis to come up with the conclusion, which the administration has even said they presume is the case, that they were harmless balloons. But until you've got some of the material, you can't make that conclusion. So we got to find some of the remnants of these 3 shoot downs. And then third, and this is where I think again we just have a gap in coverage. For a long time, our defense systems and radar systems were set up to monitor aircraft, to monitor potential missiles. The idea that there are other types of technology. I talked a little bit earlier about drone legislation that I've put in place. That's usually for drones under 400 feet of airspace. There are some of the drones, and we see the military use of these in Ukraine, that go above 400 feet. So we got to put some rules of the road in place there. One of the things that I found out, and frankly, I wasn't fully aware of this, that if you send up a balloon, and they could be a weather balloon, it could be some commercial venture, it could be some scientific experiment, the reporting system, while there is a minimum requirement that you're supposed to notify the FAA, once you've done that notification, how you monitor where that balloon may float, I think we've really got a gap in knowledge. So I'm trying to do my homework to confirm this, and then if this is the case, we just are going to need a better system, because there's a lot we can learn on a scientific basis from this kind of activity. But what we've seen now is this kind of effort to maybe almost overdo if there was some underdoing on the first item, and which has constantly raised a whole lot of questions. So let's look at this in a scientific way. Let's recover some of the remnants of the last 3 shoot downs, and then let's see if there is a gap in how this activity is reported and recorded, so that we don't inadvertently shoot down some university science experiment. If we've got that gap, let's put a system in place that gives us better visibility and make sure that we're only taking down items that are of national security threats.
Senator, our next question is Mitchell Miller with WPOP.
Thank you.
Mitchell?
Thank you, Senator, for joining us. Following up on the China balloon incident, the Senate, of course, condemned China last night in the measures that were adopted. But what more broadly do you think the United States needs to do to stand up to China? There's been talk about more competitive legislation. What are some of the things that you think need to be done?
Well, Mitchell, thanks for the question. And I'm going to try to, I got a 30-minute answer on this, but since the vote has started, I'm not going to give you that. I think, over the last 5 years, the Intelligence Committee, on a bipartisan basis, has been going out and trying to brief industry by industry what an enormous technology threat China is. And when I say China, my beef is with the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping's authoritarian leadership. It is not with the Chinese people, or obviously with Chinese Americans or the Chinese diaspora anywhere. And frankly, prior to COVID, industries would listen, and some would accept this, but some were kind of like, well, I can't miss the market in China. I'm going to ignore how the Chinese government treats the Uyghurs or treats the people of Hong Kong. Well, we've seen the kind of authoritarian approach that China took to COVID in terms of lockdowns, in terms of not sharing information. Post-COVID, we have continued to make these kind of presentations. I think American industry realizes that, China's been stealing roughly $500 billion worth of intellectual property on an annual basis, not just from American companies, but from non-Chinese companies. So the threat is there. We've also seen in 2 cases, Huawei, a telecom company, where frankly there was not an American competitor even. We'd given up our leadership there. We're now trying to say, how do we get ahead of what's called beyond 5G, so-called O-RAN? How do we make sure that we don't fall behind again? And we've worked well with our allies on that. On the semiconductor legislation, on the CHIPS bill, again, this was an area that America dominated. 40-50% of all the chips made in the world were made in America as recently as the mid-90s. We were rapidly approaching production down to single digits. So the CHIPS legislation, bipartisan, $52 billion to bring those jobs back to America, but more importantly, to make sure we've got a secure supply chain, is extraordinarily important. What my committee is going to do now is, what are the other areas of competition with China that we've got to make sure that we and our friends around the world don't allow the Communist Party of China to dominate. We've seen lots of discussion the last few months about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. I can assure you, China is investing at a rate close to, if not more, than we in the West are in terms of investments in artificial intelligence. We did, I think, significant legislation around advanced energy. And that's spurring a lot of jobs coming back to this country. But when you look at small modular nuclear reactors, something I've been a supporter of for a long time, or the kind of the holy grail around clean energy, fusion energy, China is investing. We got to make sure we match that. When we look at the whole realm of synthetic biology, how do we create drugs in a new way, using computing power as well as typical biotechnology, how we grow our food or animals in a way that is frankly can help feed the world, how we produce literally chemical compounds through synthetic biology means. These are all areas where I think there needs to be, there's going to be healthy competition. I do not underestimate the Chinese ability. They've got a lot of smart engineers. They've stolen a lot of intellectual property. They are investing in a lot of these new technologies at a rate the way we used to back in the days immediately after Sputnik. And I think this is an area, broadly speaking, where there is huge bipartisan support, where we can, we've got to win the technology challenge in a series of these domains. And I think in Congress, this is, even in this divided government Congress, if we can lay out a sophisticated plan that's smart, there will be bipartisan support.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. If we do not call on you, feel free to follow up with our office and we will get back to you. Our last question will be Olivia Jacquist with WRIC.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I know you had mentioned that you were critical of the Biden administration's handling of this first Chinese spy balloon and kind of, the way in which it was allowed to float over our airspace would not have been allowed by the Communist Party of China. But on Monday, a Chinese official made the claim that unauthorized balloons from the U.S. had flown over the Chinese airspace more than 10 times since the start of last year. So is there any truth to that statement? And if so, do you know anything about those objects from the U.S.? Why would we be doing that?
Listen, I'm not going to be able to talk about any kind of classified information in terms of how we try to investigate what China is doing both on a technology side and a military side. It's obviously the case that, and this is not breaking news, but that nation states have espionage units. Nation states have spies. I mean, we have the CIA, the NRO, the NGA, the NSA, all of these three-letter alphabets entities, many of them located in Virginia. That's job is to monitor our potential adversaries. What I don't think is the case, though, and what was so unusual about the Chinese spy balloon was, you had Americans using everyday cell phones and taking pictures of this huge object. Again, I will stand by my earlier statement. If there were Chinese citizens seeing and taking photos with their cell phones of some object that was floating, from Beijing to Shanghai, down across the Chinese mainland, off the coast, down towards Taiwan, I don't think there's anyone that would think that the Communist Party of China would allow that to happen. I'm sorry, guys, that we didn't get as much time. I've got to run and go vote, but thanks so much. And if you didn't get a question answered that you needed timeliness, get to our team and I'll try to get back to you later today. Thanks, everybody.